Hey friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to the Friendoville channel. The show Picard is coming up in about 2 weeks, and I thought this would be a good opportunity. If there are friendos out there who might not be as nerdy about Star Trek as I am, some of you might be wondering, hey, there are a lot of episodes out there of Next Generation, Voyager movies to sift through to be prepared for when this Picard show starts, so I can be in the know what went on before, what's the important stuff, so that I can be prepared for the upcoming show Picard. And so I figured I would list off about 10 or so episodes of Star Trek in one movie that you really need to see before hopping into the Picard show. And I'm basing this strictly off of the trailers that we've seen so far, and maybe some of the comments that some of the people behind the scenes have made about the show and what to expect in order of importance. So the very first thing that you should see is the season 2 Next Generation episode, Measure of a Man. Of course, this is Next Generation. It's probably their first really great episode. It deals with some pretty heavy themes. The gist of it is, you guys might remember this, Data basically fights for his very existence in sort of a courtroom setting. Basically what happens is he's in communication with Starfleet. There's a guy there named Maddox who is very interested in cybertronics, in the positronic brain that Data has, and he wants to have Data transferred to his space station where he can take Data apart, put him back together, and create perhaps maybe another Data, a Data for every starship, or a whole army of Datas, of androids. And Data's like, whoa, hold on a second, dude. I don't want any part of this. I am my own person. And then Picard basically has to defend that idea that Data is his own life form. He's a sentient life form who should be able to choose what he does. He's not a property. He's not a piece of property that belongs to Starfleet. Riker is put, of course, in the unenvious position of being sort of the prosecution, taking Starfleet's side of things. And it's a really, really fascinating episode that deals with some really cool themes. And it feels like, from the trailers of this Picard show, that honestly, like, it kind of feels like this might be, in a lot of ways, a spiritual sequel to that single episode. You'll notice in the trailer there's at least one shot of what looks like a whole storage of androids that look like sort of Data type androids that maybe Starfleet is looking to put into service as property of Starfleet. And I'm getting the feeling that maybe that's why Picard leaves to go tell Starfleet, hey man, we already dealt with this like 30 years ago, and you can't be doing this. And so it was really interesting, and I do get the feeling that Measure of a Man is going to play deeply into this. It'd be very interesting. I have no idea if the actor's still alive or not, or even active. If he is alive, if they brought back the guy who played Maddox in that Measure of a Man episode, it'd be very kind of interesting when they brought him back. They're bringing back some other actors, which we'll get to in a second. The next thing that you really need to watch prior to Picard is the movie Star Trek Nemesis. Now, this was not the most popular movie when it came out. It's probably only really better than Insurrection, which was not a very good movie. But it was the final Star Trek Next Generation movie. It sort of gave everybody their send-off. You know, sometimes franchises might want to forget about, like, the Terminator franchise, for example. They have literally written off, like, 4 of those movies out of existence when this latest one came out. They're not doing that. Nemesis, at the end of it, spoiler alert, by the way, you're going to find out when you watch Picard anyways, Data dies at the end of Nemesis, saving Captain Picard. And that seems to still weigh heavy on Picard's shoulders when, in these trailers, he's either having some sort of holodeck recreation or dreams of Data still. Brent Spiner coming back for whatever these are. You see one shot of what appears to be either Data or Lors, or B-Force. He's the android that sort of takes Data's place at the end of Nemesis, sort of being stashed in a drawer somewhere. And it's obvious that the events of Nemesis play in heavily as well, and it's the last time we saw them prior to this new Picard show. So it's kind of obvious that that's really something that you really should watch. We also see at the end of Nemesis where Commander Riker goes off to, and of course we meet up with Commander Riker, I think towards the middle of the Picard series. You'll get a better sense of where these people all have been last time we saw them if you watch Nemesis. And I mean, honestly, it's a fun show. It's like a decent high budget or large budget version of the TV show. Tom Hardy has a pretty decent role as the main bad guy in it. He plays the clone of Picard. It's actually pretty, and Commander Riker gets to fight Hellboy because that guy's in it. Ron, what's his face, is in it, that plays Hellboy. He plays a Romulan guy. So yeah, it's definitely something you want to check out if you're going to be watching Picard. Next up, the Star Trek Next Generation episode, Eyeborg. This one was the debut of the character Hugh, which was the Borg who became autonomous. He sort of got separated from the collective, and the crew of the Enterprise sort of taught him, hey man, you're your own guy. And they sort of flirt with sending Hugh back to the collective, but with like a virus, a nanovirus that can kill off all the Borg. And of course, it takes place after Best of Both Worlds, where Picard is still traumatized from his time as Locutus in those episodes. And so the cool thing is the actor Jonathan Del Arco, who I didn't even know was still active as an actor, but apparently he's been doing all sorts of stuff ever since then, both in the acting realm and apparently a lot of human rights activism stuff. He's coming back to play Hugh. I hope he has a fairly beefy role in this, because I really like that character in Next Generation. And Eyeborg is where you meet Hugh. You can also check out the episodes Descent 1 and 2. Is a 2-part episode. There's a lot of it's an episode where Data is sort of manipulated by Lore via the emotions chip. It's sort of a goofy 2-parter. It's not like the best in the world. It has like a really good cliffhanger in episode 1, but episode 2 kind of falls flat. But that's where you see Hugh again, and you get to see what ends up happening to him before you see him next in Picard. And so those are decent episodes, but Eyeborg is actually a really, really good one. You should definitely check that out prior to watching Picard, and that sort of gives you everything you need to know about that character. The next episode I would advise you to see prior to watching Picard is the Voyager episode called Scorpion. It's the one that introduced 7 of 9. She ended up becoming one of the best written characters in Voyager. I was a big fan of hers, and really the second half of the run of Voyager, which featured her. I think she popped up in like season 4 or so, season 3, season 4, something like that. I think she's going to figure pretty prominently. There's, shots of her talking to Picard. There's shots of her firing off like these double rifle things. So it seems like 709 might have a decent sized role in this. I know a lot of people were very excited when they saw her in the trailers, including me. Also check out the Voyager episode, The Raven, which also explored a lot of her backstory in terms of how she was assimilated by the Borg. The short answer is really bad parenting, because she was assimilated when she was a child, when her parents were on an expedition, an exploration thing, because they're scientists. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and they got assimilated. They really shouldn't have been out there. But it's actually a really good episode. So yeah, check that out. Another Voyager episode to check out before Picard is Unimatrix Zero. Another one, it sort of explores 709's life as a Borg. She was sort of connected in these episodes to this like secret sort of neural hideaway where a bunch of other Borg would sort of hang out, and you see like a different side of her. She has like a boyfriend in this place. It's actually really cool. It's a very 709 centric episode. So it's actually a 2-part episode. So I would suggest checking that out as well. Let's see here. Here's another episode you might want to check out. Maybe this episode might feature heavily and it might not. It's called The Offspring, and it's an episode of Next Generation where Data essentially builds himself a daughter named Lao. And that's kind of important because there has been some suggestion that maybe the young woman who plays Daj, that's the name that she's been given up to this point, in the Picard show, the one who comes up to him and sort of kicks off as the catalyst for whatever he's doing and says, hey, I need your help. There's been some speculation that maybe she might have something to do with Lau. She might be some iteration of her, maybe not. So this episode, The Offspring, might play heavily into the episode, into Picard, or it might not at all. The Offspring, it felt very much like a sequel to Measure of a Man, because Data in the episode is writing letters to Maddox, the guy who is trying to disassemble him, to let him know, to update him and say, hey, this is what I've been doing, this is what's been going on. And so, once again, Starfleet wants to get their hands all over Data's daughter, saying, hey, you put this thing together, we want in on this, and no, man, you can't do that. So it's actually a really good episode too. It's like a really sort of heartbreaking tearjerker episode by the end. It's really good stuff. And then finally, of course, I mentioned this earlier, Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2. This is probably the closest thing. Next Generation, the TV show, came to having like a really cool action adventure movie. It was when the Borg returned after their first appearance, and Picard gets assimilated, turns into Locutus, and that played a really heavy role later on, even in like the First Contact movie. They would always reference that. It was a big burden on Picard's shoulders. So it would not surprise me at all if they brought that up quite a bit in the Picard series. It was such a big moment in his life, and now dealing with, be it Borg or androids or whatever, they might reference that as well. And on top of that, those probably two of the best episodes of Next Generation there ever were. So anyways, those are the episodes of Star Trek and the couple movies that I think you probably should watch if you're going to dive into the Picard series. Hopefully you will. We're going to cover it one way or the other on the Four Lights podcast. So yeah, we still have to discuss all that, but I'm going to be talking about Picard. I think it starts January 23rd or so, something like that. So yeah, there you go. If there's anything else that I've missed, let me know in the comments, and we'll talk about it. Till next time, I'll talk to you later.